Well, Albion is a fairy tale world first and foremost. It's not a fantasy land.
It can be creepy, quite stylised. You enjoy being in that world.
It's full of magic and fantasy, and it's got monsters.
You can be 1 minute in a region which is completely innocuous, and then you can next minute be in a region which is completely evil.
Like any nursery rhyme, there's a horror behind it, but in the face it's very pleasant.
Fable 2 is set 500 years further on in time from Fable 1. The reason we did this is we really wanted to make a leap from it being kind of a oldie worldy fantasy world to a bit closer to our time now. So there's guns in the world. The locations you visited in Fable 1, some of them have gone completely, some of them are back, but they're ruins. Enabled us to sort of advance the world so that we could actually tell the story we wanted to tell. We sat down with Fable 1 and we kind of looked at a film called Sleepy Hollow by Tim Burton. And we said, well, wouldn't it be great to have a game that kind of looked like that?
The influences we've got have come more from filmic backgrounds rather than other games or comics or whatever. We've kind of veered away from stuff like Lord of the Rings and all the kind of high fantasy stuff that people are very familiar with.
We wanted a kind of Dick Turpin kind of look mixed with the darkness of Sleepy Hollow, and we've succeeded quite well in that kind of 17th, 18th century type thing.
The world's a little bit darker. There's still that fantasy element there. Sometimes there's this beautiful landscapes that are there. There's village lives and cities, but the whole world is a little bit closer to our times.
We've very much focused on the world that we're familiar with rather than this really high fantasy orcs and goblins type stuff. We've gone for the world that many of us are familiar with.
We've drawn a lot of its inspiration from Surrey, but in terms of the architecture and how it's put together, and one of the artist's guiding principles is there's never any right angles in Albion. Everything is slightly stylised, but it should be very familiar.
We've got a huge variety of styles. We've got from the woodland of Brightwood to the rural sort of agricultural feel in somewhere like Ravenskull. We've got the dark gothic mystery of somewhere like the Spire. You've got windswept, wet kind of coastland in Rook Ridge, through to the openness of somewhere like Bower Lake.
I think probably one of my favourite locations is Bower Lake, just because of the scope of it. The game starts quite tight and we open it up by the second chapter, and the first time you see it truly open is in Bower Lake, and that has lots of sections. And like every other region, lots of secrets.
Right from the top, we'll gather an awful lot of reference. So obviously, the internet's fantastic for that. We can find as much as we need through just Googling stuff. We can go out and take photographs locally, which we have done quite a lot in the past. Not so much with this. We certainly did in Fable. We have done that to a certain extent. Then we have a couple of concept artists who will concept up really kind of broad visions of how they would see it, and from that point onwards we'll start homing it down and fine-tuning and using what we think works and dumping stuff that we don't.
The world itself was composed of light and dark. It's important to have contrast in each area, especially in terms of plot points in the game. In order to get the most impact for a region, you would need to have the light one before it and then hit the dark, and so that it blows you away a bit more. Fable has always been about organics, and it's always been about lushness and and green fields and lush forests and scary graveyards, and we're trying our best, and I think we've succeeded in a lot of ways, creating something beautiful to look at in terms of the landscape. A lot of creatures have made the transition from Fable 1 to Fable 2. They're the ones that were the most popular among the team. And the Balverines made it through to Fable 2 because we liked some of the backstory involved in them. I mean, essentially they're werewolves, but there was a lot of scope for comedy and storylines within that. And the trolls, something that we really wanted to expand on from the first game, because the trolls were essentially the earth becoming alive, and we wanted something just huge. The creatures of the game are based on basic horror at the start, you know, the grim fairy tale, darkness. Banshees are particularly terrifying when you play the game. They're real. We went to town on the horror of that. They summon little ghost children with pointy knives to come after you with glowing red eyes, while they scream in the background, and it's quite blood-curdling when you see it, especially as it follows some of the more light-hearted moments in the game.
The atmosphere we tried to create is one of a fairy tale world that's otherworldly, that doesn't feel like any other world you've seen before, but still sort of familiar to you. Invokes sort of childhood memories to maybe a certain extent, that's beautiful, that's also scary in parts, and the sort of place that you'd really want to explore.